Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Apples and Genos Fantasy Hockey Podcast. My name is Nate Niblink. I'm the creator of Apples and Genos, originator of the Zero G Draft Strategy. And in this podcast, Blake and I are going to bring you the biggest busts for fantasy this season. Let's get it. Of course, I have your friend and my best friend, the biggest meme. It's Blake Creamer. Blake, how are we feeling tonight?
You know, I wish I was the biggest meme. That just means more clicks for Apples and Genos, right, Nate? See, that's where we're... Yeah, I don't know where you're going.
Well, I was going to say, I wasn't sure when I was preparing this intro if I was going to have to explain to you what a meme was. I know you're from a different generation, and sometimes, these things might pass you by, but I'm glad that you're on board right from the start.
Well, first off, that's hurtful. I mean, right at the start of the podcast, too. I mean, I'm trying to shower you with love, and you're showering me with this painful... Oh, God. And it's pronounced Mimi. Okay.
It definitely is. Well, in this episode, we are going to be going through the biggest busts for fantasy this year. It is going to be a little spicy. I think we're going to have more disagreement in this one, Blake, than maybe in any other podcast this off season. So I think things could get a little spicy, a little testy. So I wanted to, get the people in the groove with that little intro there. But I guess we should probably define for the people just a little bit what we're talking about when we're talking about a bust. We're basically just talking about a player we think has a pretty strong chance of hurting you in fantasy this year. Definitely every player we talk about here, they have their good scenarios along with their bad scenarios, but these are the players that we're pretty actively worried about the downside on, and we think that there's a pretty good chance that if you take this guy that he might end up really hurting your fantasy chances this year. And so we want to get a warning out to the good listeners, the good watchers of the channel. Blake, you got anything to add on your definition of biggest bust?
I'm just happy we're talking about big busts. I mean, I'll do that all day. You know what I'm saying? This is the kind of content that I'm here for. All right. You know what the best bust is? The biggest bust? Ludwig von Beethoven. All right. Yeah. You ever seen that bust? You ever seen that thing it's on the mantle? It's just his bust. That's where I'm going. That's a double meaning bust. You guys get what we're saying here? Anyways, let's move on. That's terrible. I'm sorry, Nate.
That was perfect, Blake. I can't imagine of a better introduction. Let's get into it. Let's give the people your first bust on the evening. Alex Ovechkin.
Yeah, sure. I only like the only busts I really like, big ones. All right. And we're talking about Alex Ovechkin here. Massive bust. No, that's a lie. But this is in line with what we're talking about here. And, if you did listen to our projection shows, you heard sort of my take on Alex Ovechkin. I think it's a player in decline. And I think that with everything they've done in Washington here, bringing in all these new players, I think they're trying to win. Right. And I think if they want to win, they need a guy that can play a two-way game. And Ovechkin does not do that. Right. I mean, well, let's talk about what he did last year. First off, kind of muddled his way through 79 games. He looked like he was injured last year as well. I think he was playing through some injury there, but he's Ovechkin, so he's going to be out there. But 31 goals, 34 assists for 65 points. Reasonable season, but his shooting percentage fell off. His shots on goal fell off. His individual scoring chances for actually fell way off. He was 81st in the league in individual scoring chances for. That's kind of a stark difference from what we are used to seeing from Alex Ovechkin. And I just feel like, early in this guy's career, he was a machine off the rush, Alex Ovechkin. I mean, we've all seen the highlights. This guy's insane. He's amazing. He's the best goal scorer ever. I'm not talking Yang on Alex Ovechkin, but I mean, what he's doing now, it's basic. Like, I've watched some highlights here, just even a little, just to prepare for this, because I know this take might be a little spicy with Alex Ovechkin as a bust here. But this guy's basically just powering the puck into the zone on the right side and flipping pucks on net from like a low percentage spot, right? So yeah, his metrics they're like empty calorie metrics to me. He was 34th overall in shots on goal per 60 last year, 9th overall in chuck and pucks, but then again 81st in individual scoring chances for. So I just really think that they're going to move away a little bit from Alex Ovechkin. He's going to get every chance to succeed and get this goal record in terms of offense. But, I've mentioned previously in other podcasts, they didn't even have him out on the ice in 3-on-3 overtime, right? Because he can't skate. Like, he's one of the things Alex Ovechkin is really good at too, is forechecking and getting in, and hitting the defenseman. But his skating is so poor now. Like, he can't even really get back into the play. So it's like, you're almost like a skater down. I don't know. I'm diving deep here on Alex Ovechkin, but that all said, like, I've got him projected for 67 points, still extremely valuable for fantasy hockey. But I think if you're expecting the Ovechkin of old, even like 75-point Ovechkin, I just don't see it happening. I think that, they brought in some other options here that they might prioritize a bit more. You got Dylan Strome, who could take another step this season. He's obviously going to be attached to Ovechkin, but all the players they brought in, Mangiapane, like even the Connor McMichael taking a step this year, PLD, who we've talked about previously. I think these players are all going to eat into Ovechkin's minutes a little bit, and we're going to see, just age-related decline continue for Ovechkin. So I don't know. Where are you at with Ovechkin here? Because this is a guy we were taking in the second round last year pretty comfortably, and it wasn't a great season. Obviously, the metrics were there, but it wasn't a great season. What are you thinking about Ovechkin this year?
Yeah, I mean, in drafts, it's obviously a different proposition than it was a year ago. You're not having to draft him with such a premium pick, so that part of it's all right. I do see the concern. I do see the same metrics, obviously, you're looking at. They have fallen off. It's been a decline of kind of 2 straight years now. The ice time was reduced under Spencer Carberry by about a minute per game. That part obviously doesn't give you the warm and fuzzies about what he might accomplish. I will say I do think that the team around him has gotten better this offseason. Like, obviously, you like yourself some Pierre-Luc Dubois, and
What?
so adding
Oh,
him to the power play should be a net positive in that case, right? So that should be something. Tom Wilson was injured last year. Adding him back into the lineup should be a net positive. There were times last year where it was literally Dylan Strome and Alex Ovechkin, and like you couldn't name anybody else in the Washington Capitals top 6. Like, it was pretty bad at times. And then this offseason, they go out, they get Jacob Chikrin, they get Matt Roy. The top 4 for Washington on
yeah,
defense
that's
actually looks
great.
really good this year. And so hopefully that means they're not spending as much time in their own zone and they're getting to play on the offensive side of the puck a little bit more this year. So I do see some slight positives in those kind of areas for Ovechkin this year. I think he gets a little bit of a bounce back this year. That's kind of the way I've projected it. So I do think that we might get like one more solid season out of Ovechkin, but that's not to say that I don't see the downside risk here as well, that it could just be that, he's hit that age cliff a little bit and we're just going to see more of a descent downwards at this point. So I don't disagree that there's risk here with Ovechkin, and my best guess at this point is that we get one more season out of it. I mean, our projections are not really that far apart when we get down to it. So the median projection for both of us is close to the same. I'm for
Yeah.
39 goals, 70 points. So I'm just a little bit higher on him there. But I think in the end, you're just a little bit more bearish on the downside cases, where I think that probably we're getting another season out of Ovechkin. All right, my first bust. I know you're going to love this one, Blake. Lucas Raymond is my pick here. This one, for me, it's honestly just a pretty classic case of all the luck metrics that we talk about a fair bit here at Apples and Ginos. My base projection for him, 24 goals, 39 assists, 63 points. That's really coming because I think that we're going to see some regression across those luck metrics for Lucas Raymond. There is the caveat that this is a young player. Sometimes the efficiency kind of jumps up before the underlying metrics kind of have time to settle into where he'll be throughout his prime as an NHL player. So I'm not discounting that's a possibility. But, his first 2 years in the league, he has a 65% IPP, a 60% IPP. Then last year, 72%. Pretty big jump. First 2 years, shooting percentage, 12.5%, 12.7%. Last year, 19.1%. Huge jump there. First 2 years, on ice shooting percentage, 9.9, 10.7. Last year, 12.3. Huge jump there. So those things are, yeah, just up front, that's what I'm looking at the most. I have him for even more ice time than he got last year. I do think his role on the team is pretty secure, but also they have other wingers there. They have Alex DeBrincat, they have Patrik Laine, who I still think has a lot left in the tank. They went out and got Vladimir Tarasenko. So if Raymond is not performing well, I don't think he's necessarily the lock that everybody seems to think he is to maintain his exposure to Dylan Larkin. Dylan Larkin, the player that really the number one player with a bullet that I want on Detroit this year. I think Larkin is the straw that stirs the drink in Detroit, and everybody else is kind of just feeding off him a little bit. Maybe with the exception of Kane, who I still think has kind of his own gravity in that regard. But yeah, that's kind of my take on Raymond. I do think that he's good enough to, stay in this role for the vast majority of the season, to get his good minutes alongside Dylan Larkin, to get a good chunk of that power play, and to really, have a good season. I just don't know that we're going to really see. I think a lot of people are expecting that Raymond actually takes another step this year, and I think that's something that I really can't bank on given what I'm looking at with these luck metrics.
Yeah. I don't hate this take, Nate, at all. It makes sense. Like, this is, if I was mid season right now and I'm looking at my buy lows and sell highs, like Raymond would be a sell high. Like, this doesn't look sustainable. Right. But, I projected him for 69 points. Right. So I'm 6 points higher than you. That's fine. He had 72 last year. So I'm not projecting him to take another step, but I am sort of projecting him to maintain this level that he has here, with a touch for more. And I think a lot of that should come on the power play. I think this is a guy, he got 2 minutes, 43 seconds last year on the power play. I've projected him for the 3-minute power play treatment this year and 19 power play points. So there's a little bit more right off the top. And I do think this is a player that is going to take a step in his development, right? It might be a minor step, but I really like what I saw from Lucas Raymond in the last quarter of the season last year. And I've said this before, but 21 points in 21 games, including 14 goals. That's where his massive efficiency, that's where he popped off, right? He was getting goals all the time, but not only that, these goals were clutch. His goals were clutch as hell. He was tying the game with a minute left. He was scoring the winner in overtime. He was out there when the game was on the line. And that is something that does go. It matters to me when I see something like that. And then when you got a guy he was 4th overall draft pick in 2020, he's part of the Yzer plan. Obviously they got to lock this guy up. He's still an RFA. What the hell are they doing? I don't quite get it. I mean, you need Mo Seider and you need Lucas Raymond on the team, Mr. Yzerman. It makes no sense, but that would suck if he holds out or if he doesn't get into training camp. Then I might have to alter the projection, right? Because I don't like that when players do that. So I'm hoping he gets in for a full training camp. He's good to go. His contract situation is out of the way. I just feel his shooting percentage should regress, no question there. But I think his power play on ice shooting percentage in particular should rise up a little bit. Detroit is an interesting team this year and kind of a one I'm a little bit wary of. That's for sure. You've got him as a bust, Lucas Raymond. I wouldn't call him a bust, but like I said, I'm not expecting him to pop off. But Detroit was the number 1 team in finishing last year. And their expected goals for at 5-on-5, 23rd. But so they're popping off, right? Their power play was 8th best in the league. So they were doing a lot of good things that are potentially unsustainable. We need to see what happens this year, but I like to take a lot. It makes total sense. And I'm if I'm drafting Raymond at all this year, it's at extreme value. Cause I'm wary of this as well, but I do trust the player a little bit more than you, I think.
All right, Blake, take us in bust number 2.
Busting it. Oh yeah. We're busting our brains out. I don't know if I like the way that sounds, but we're gonna move on. My second bust here is Mikhail Sergachev, and again, like we said, we're talking about busts. I think with Mikhail Sergachev in particular, there's some risk, obviously, with Dursey in town, and we had this discussion in our first projection show. So definitely go check out that show. It's a really good one. I love talking about Utah, by the way. I think that there's so many fun players, and Mikhail Sergachev is a fun player. It's a really great trade for them hockey-wise in reality, and it could be a really great trade for fantasy, right? But when you look at Sergachev's big season in 2022-23, 64 points in 79 games, including 27 power play points. Okay, that's not real. That's not going to happen again. That was with Kucherov, Point, Stamkos, and the legendary Nick Paul. All right, that's how you get 27 power play points in a season. He was deprioritized when he was back healthy in the lineup with Tampa Bay last year, and he popped up for 7 power play points. He had a 46-point pace in 34 games. I projected him for 47 points, and I feel like his big season was the outlier. And that's what I'm concerned about, because Sergachev is rising up the draft boards. People are like, yeah, you bring Sergachev in, you're giving him top power play, you pay him that money. And those arguments make sense to me. They make absolute sense. I'm not saying that he's not going to get power play 1. I do think that Durzi is going to eat into that time and, therefore going to eat into his power play production. So I don't even think Sergachev gets 20 power play points this year. I really don't. And that's, that might be a spicy take, but where this guy's being drafted and like what the expectation of Sergachev going into this year, I'm just not here for it, especially with Durzi in town, because when I dug in on those 2 players, like, yes, they're different players, but offensively, like, I might like Durzi a little bit better, at least in the metrics that I'm looking at, in chance assist, shot assist, bringing the puck into the zone, things like that. Durzi shows out a little bit better in those metrics to me. And he has some tenure there. He's played on that top power play. Doesn't mean a damn thing. I could very well see Sergachev on power play 1 to start the year. No question. But I'm tempering expectations. And I think that's where I'm at with Sergachev here, because I think his perceived value is a little bit higher than what it probably will be.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one that we see a little bit differently. I'm more into the upside case for Sergachev than you are for sure. The biggest qualm, I guess, that I have with Sergachev is just the qualm that I have with every single player that's going to a new situation, is that there is so much unknown that, he could hate Utah. Like that's a scenario that happens, and he's just miserable all season and it affects his play. That's a possibility. But I'm also interested in the upside scenarios. I have him for 20 power play points, kind of on the dot there. So that's where I've got him, and I've got him for 55 points as a base projection. So definitely a good chunk higher than you there. The peripherals we know are going to be there. When you acquire a guy who's making this kind of money and you send the package that they did, including top prospects, picks, etc., to me that signals that you think this guy is your number 1 defenseman for the future. And to me, if you're acquiring Sergachev, that also means that he's on the top power play. He's always been pretty efficient in terms of garnering offense. I have him for a 47% even strength IPP. That would be pretty high amongst all defensemen across the league. I have him at 66% on the power play. Again, that's a really good number for a defenseman. So I think that this is basically a scenario in which Utah is kind of what most people are expecting. I haven't projected. We talked about in the Sleepers episode that we did recently about Logan Cooley and about Dylan Genther, and we kind of had our median projections out there. This Sergachev projection is kind of in line with that, but I think there is that pop-off possibility where Cooley and Genther and maybe even somebody else, Michelli or somebody else, also really pop off this year. And then does Sergachev come along for the ride, and now he's a 60-point defenseman with great peripherals, and now you're like, man, you had to have Sergachev or you didn't make the playoffs in some scenarios. Like, I just don't want to be out on that kind of player personally. So I think this is one we're going to disagree on. It's a fun one to keep in the back of our minds or to write down somewhere, and we can see who came out on top when everything's tallied up at the end of the year.
Oh, yeah. It feels good.
All right, my second one here is going to be Steven Stamkos. I have Stamkos projected for 34 goals, 39 assists, 73 points. Don't get me wrong. I think Stamkos has plenty left in the tank. I don't think he's washed or anything like that. But when you look at the kind of success that he had, I think last year, 81 points in 79 games. I think, like, realistically, how does it get better than where he was at in Tampa Bay? He's not going to play with Philip Forsberg, who's their best player amongst the forward group there, because they both kind of play the same position.
Yep.
Even if Stamkos did go back to center, I don't think that they're taking Forsberg off the O'Reilly line when they had just had so much chemistry between O'Reilly and Forsberg throughout the season last year. So I don't really see how Stamkos gets exposure to Forsberg outside of the power play. But on the power play, how does that work? Because, they kind of both play the same position there as well. So I think there could be some growing pains. Stamkos, not a spring chicken anymore, 34 years old. Obviously signs a big deal here. They are going to give him opportunity. I'm just more concerned. I talked about, I have concern for every player going to a new situation, that there is always that downside scenario that it just doesn't work the way we all think it should. With Stamkos at his age, him not getting exposure to the best player offensively that they have there, you could argue Roman Josi is that player, and I'd hear that argument for sure. But amongst the forwards anyway. And so, yeah, is he playing the whole year with Tommy Novak as his center? Like, that's great for Tommy Novak. I'm not sure that's great for Steven
Yeah.
Stamkos. And so I just feel like there's more downside scenarios for Steven Stamkos than there are upside scenarios, like true upside where like he's actually better than he was in Tampa. I don't think that's a realistic expectation for Stamkos this year. And so I think, based on early returns, I think I'm just going to be off of Stamkos pretty much everywhere unless he's just going to fall to me in a big way.
Yeah, it's a really good take. It's just Stamkos was never a guy I was very high on to begin with, just because his production over these last few years was so reliant on his power play performance, right? Which is a lock. His floor is crazy solid because of his attachment to that top power play there in Tampa. This guy had 39 power play points last year. He's good to go. 40 goals. Stammer. Now we're talking Yang on the man, but I projected him for 76. So a little bit of a step back. It's too much variance. It's like, yeah, you've got an older player that has had some injury issues. Like, I'm not baking that in here, but like, yeah, it's a guy like there's variance with the player himself. And now he's going into a situation where, yeah, he's not even on the top line. And does he, that's an interesting conversation. Does he get center on the second line there? And maybe they move Evangelista up or something like that, move Marchessault over to the left side. Either way, it's a second line. Right. So
Yeah.
he's supplementing the offense a little bit more. Right. I think his best days are past him. That's for sure. Right. Stamkos is not a great forechecker. Right. So he's going to need someone to do that. His skating is okay. But I mean, offensively, this guy's a machine. His shot is, past elite. Like, he's an amazing shooter. But yeah, I just don't see it. And then that power play. Right. Like, we're going to go from a 39-point power play. Like, I projected him for 33, but even that feels a little bit high. That's like out of respect. Yeah. I feel like, you know what I mean? It's like, this guy's an amazing power play performer. Like, we got to give him a little bit of a shot with his numbers here, and that he'll be able to recreate that. But, the spot where he likes to play, which is the left flank there, that's where Forsberg plays. So, he's going to have to get used to a different system there on the power play. And, granted, he's going to have a full training camp, but there's too much there, right? New team, all this stuff. He's probably still a bit salty, like, that Tampa didn't pick him up. Like, I still, it's a bit of a weird thing. I don't like how that all unfolded there. I mean, obviously Tampa got better, I think, with the pickup of Jake Gensel there. But yeah, anyways, long story short, I totally agree with you here. I think, where he's being drafted, like, it's too much draft capital. I think we're not going to get a better than 81-point season. And I think there's a really good chance that it's going to be less with Stamkos. So there you go.
All right, Blake, take us in. Who's your third potential bust?
Oh God, I had to put this man in here just to show I'm not a mega homer like I present myself to be. But yeah, I got Brock Boeser as my third bust here, and yeah, it kills me. It kills me to do this, right? And this all said, I still projected Boeser for like a pretty nice season. I got him for 33 goals, 36 assists, 69 points. And he had 73 last year. So I mean, I'm not saying that Boeser is not like a valuable player that you want to get on your team. I mean, he has access to a great power play, and he's a big part of that power play. Like, this guy got 16 power play goals last year, career high, 25 power play points, career high. He had a 73% power play share. That's not going away. He's good to go. He's attached to Miller, who is a beast himself, but 19% shooting percentage with Brock Boeser. That's where I draw the line, Brock. Okay. That's a little bit spicy to me, and then obviously we know what the Canucks did with their PDO, their shooting percentage, their save percentage was off the charts last year. Brock Boeser's on ice shooting percentage at even strength, career high, of course, almost 14%. That's going to go down, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I gave him 69 points, like, again, out of respect. It's like, the Canucks are an efficient team. That's the big difference
Yeah,
between the Canucks and like Detroit, for instance, right?
sure.
Canucks have been efficient even through their bad years. They were efficient offensively for the last 3 seasons, whereas Detroit, we haven't seen that. But this all said, I see Boeser more of like a 60 to 65 point player, or 60 to 70 point player, as opposed to like the 70 to 80 point player people might be valuing him as. And I'm just not here for that. Again, he shot up the draft boards. Like I can't comfortably draft Boeser. He was being drafted at like pick 140 last year. That's where we're like, yeah, we got to get Boeser on a team. I had him in Cupful. It was awesome. I loved it. I was loving life, but I just don't see how that happens again this year. I love the Canucks and I love the player, but his point total is going to go down.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a fair pick here. I have him projected for a little bit less than you. I have him for 34 goals, which is one more than you, but 66 points in total. So, yeah, I'm in line with this overall. I do think that Brock Boeser is more likely to disappoint than to exceed this year. So, I think that this is a pretty fair take overall. And, yeah, a rare moment where you set aside your Canucks homerism and
I
you
got to do
come
it.
clean.
I got to be
Yeah.
real.
Yeah. You love to see it. All right. Well, before we get into the last 5 busts of the episode here, do want to take a second to talk about the Apples and Geos Patreon supporter tier, $2. Every month gets you access to the patron only live shows. Just did a patron only show last week for the people going through all of my draft strategy. Just basically everything I could think of put in there. It was over an hour long. So if you subscribe at the $2 a month tier, you will get access to that immediately on the Apples and Geos Patreon. So you can check that out. At the $8 a month level, you get the access to those patron only live shows, but you also get access to patron only Discord channels. We'll try to get you into a listener league. They're filling up. We're trying to fill one last one, but I'm not sure if we'll get enough people for it, unfortunately, but you can definitely try to get in there. And then you get my show notes, including the weekly waiver wire ads, targets, the people that we like to outproduce for the rest of the season, low rostered players that we're super into. And you also get the Apples and Geos player evaluation tool, which is something new for this year for Apples subscribers and above. And if you are a true fantasy degenerate, you can check out the Genos tier. $15 a month gets you every question answered by yours truly. It's not quite as good as the best friends tier, but it is just about the best thing that is publicly available. So yeah, that's that. All right, my third bust is going to be Patrik Laine. This is one that I just feel pretty unsettled about. Again, player going to a new team, obviously. I know that the expectation here is that he plays power play 1. That is the way I've projected it here. I have him for 3 minutes, average time on ice on the power play on the season. The projection comes out to 26 goals, 33 assists, 59 points. I don't know how you can realistically project some like 70 plus point upside for Laine in this scenario. Like, Montreal is just not that team. Even if the power play is terrific and Laine is a huge part of it, even if that happens, I still don't think he gets to 70 points, because like, who's he going to play with? I don't see how he's going to get inside of the Suzuki, Caulfield, Slavkovsky line. I don't see them breaking that up unless that line is really playing really poorly. And then like, maybe you don't even want to play with whoever it is they demote to play alongside Laine. But that second line, like, I don't even know who's going to be there. Kirby Dach is probably the center, I'm guessing, but is it like Alex Newhook, who's done absolutely nothing in his career so far? Is it one of the old guys who's still hanging around there, the Josh Andersons, the Brendan Gallaghers? Like, it's not pretty once you get past the top 3 guys really in Montreal in the forward group. I know people have talked about how Montreal has gotten like a lot better this year. I don't really think it's that obvious to me that they have, unless like Lane Hudson is some sort of savior on the back end, which I mean is maybe possible. But either way, I don't think this is as good of a scenario for Laine as a lot of people seem to think, that he's just going to suddenly rejuvenate culminate his career playing the second line for the Montreal Canadiens in 2024. Like, I'm just not buying it, basically. I think that he will probably have fantasy relevance. He may be a hold all season long, but I don't see the upside, and I do see a scenario in which it goes pretty poorly, and the line mates that he plays with just totally submarine his season.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. I mean, I don't know if I consider Line a bust, like, because I don't think the high expectations are high with this player. But just in the people that I've talked to, or even my expectations, like I have him projected for 60. You got him for 59. I feel like that's pretty damn reasonable on this team, right?
Yeah.
But there are a couple things that I do like about Line A. Is first off, he was off not because of an injury, right? He was dealing with his mental health situation, and if he's like, so that's kind of good. It's not like he was nursing an injury and he's coming back. He has to get up to speed again. Like, I'm hoping that he's been training and been able to do that, so he can kind of hit the ground running as long as he's feeling good mentally and he's got whatever needed to be dealt with. But this is a guy that is. Yeah, like, he's shown out in a lot of the stuff that we like. I mean, he's a really good shot generator at even strength. This guy's, usually 8 or above. Like, in his good seasons, he was above 9 shots on goal per 60, which is really nice. Generating decent amount of scoring chances. So, like, there's something there under the hood. His IPP's fallen off a cliff ever since he got to Columbus there. I mean, I guess he did have 2 decent years there, but last year especially, just awful. And I look at that situation in Columbus, and it makes me think, like, who was succeeding in that environment? You know what I mean? Like, it was terrible for everyone. And it's really, like, I'm trying not to put too much stock into what happened last year with Line A and even throughout his time in Columbus, because it's been such a whirlwind there, such a schmozzle, like, there's been nothing consistent. Whereas I feel like he's going to a team that is at least established. We have an established coach. We have an established culture. And it's a player's coach, as opposed to Dingus McGee and Mike Babcock. What's on your phone, bro? Like, buddy, none of your damn business. Get the hell out of my sight. All right. Anyways, I feel like the actual culture and team environment that he's going to is much better. And he has said in interviews, and I believe him, that he likes playing in those big markets. Like, he liked playing in Winnipeg. He likes the Canadian markets. He seems kind of jacked up to go. And I'm more, this is one where I'm a little bit more optimistic on Line A than you are, maybe. Like, granted, I'm right with you with the projection. I think that's reasonable, but this is a guy that maybe the mental aspect, if that gets better in terms of team environment and culture, maybe we see the old Line A return. Like, this is a guy that he's paced for 82 points before. He's like a 70-point guy. He can do that. It's just, will he do that? And it might not be this year with Montreal, to your point, right? But I do think, like, this is a nice signing for Montreal if he kind of gets his stuff together and plays on a consistent team.
All right. Why don't you take us in bust number 4 on your side, Blake?
Busts, big busts, giggity. We got to talk about Jeff Skinner, the twirly woo. He's twirling around. He's doing triple axles all over the place, all the way over to Edmonton. All right. Isn't it funny that Edmonton is like a destination now? People are like waiving their trade clauses to go to Edmonton. I mean, I'm Canadian. I've been to Edmonton. It's nice. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to talk yang on Edmonton, but it's not a destination. You know what I mean? And I've talked about this before. Remember Connor McDavid? Like, they show his house on like MTV Cribs, like a thing like that. Like, look at this beautiful view, and he's looking out at like a field. Like, all right, sure, like a grain silo. I don't know. Anyway, shout out to Connor McDavid. Shout out to Edmonton. I love Edmonton. I love the Oilers. Don't at me. Okay, Jeff Skinner. We're talking about him. This is a guy that I just think, again, is being valued higher than I think his actual value is, because he's going to play with Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl. That's a guarantee. They're not going to let Jeff Skinner toil away on the third line. Right. This guy's a gamer. He's a real player. Obviously, shots and chances. This guy shows out at that. Entries leading to chances. He shows out at that too. But what he doesn't show out in is defense. He doesn't do that. And that's one of the knocks on Jeff Skinner. I think that's one of the reasons that Don Granato was like, you know what, buddy? No. Last 20 games of the season, 13 minutes, 30 seconds average time on ice. That's what I think of you and your $9 million contract, Jeff Skinner. But yeah, they're I mean, where there's smoke, there's fire. And this is a guy that is notorious for just kind of half-assing it in the defensive zone, right? So
Yeah.
now you're going to a team with cup aspirations, real cup aspirations. Like it's cup or bust there in Edmonton. Like this guy, yeah, he's going to get some great offensive minutes with the best players in the league, but I don't see him out there, in the last minute of games, like anything like that. And he's not getting power play one, right? Which is where he's had some massive value. His last big season was in Buffalo in 2022-23, 82 points in 79 games. He'll never do that again. He's not going to do that again. That's my guarantee. I'm putting a stamp on it. But yeah, even in that big year, 21 power play points, and that was his career high. So he's not even going to come close to 12 power play points that he had last year. They just don't get out on the ice. So yeah, that's where I'm at with Skinner. Like I've got him projected for 51 points, which is better than he did last year, right?
Yep.
Like I'm not down on Jeff Skinner, but he's severely capped with his, he's not going to get on the power play. And I think, and I've said this before, and I'm sticking with this, like I think Arvidsson is going to be the guy, if anybody is prioritized, up after those top tier players on Edmonton, I think it's going to be Arvidsson and not Skinner. I mean, he's basically an offensive specialist at this point. He's like Tony D'Angelo as a forward. That's Jeff Skinner, right? And I'm not talking Yang on the man. We're projecting him for 51 points. It's a great trade for Edmonton to shore up that second line, or first if he plays with McDavid. Like their top six is a wagon there in Edmonton, but I just don't see it. And I think people are like, yeah, he's with McDavid or Draisaitl. Boom, he's going to pop off 82-point Skinner again. It's not going to happen, folks.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I guess, yeah, there is obviously scenarios in which Skinner does like not bust and does actually have a really terrific season, but pretty much all of those involve an injury to one of the guys on the top power play, and Skinner being the next guy and it not being Arvidsson. So it does feel like there's kind of like multiple hurdles for him to clear to even get to that point where you're feeling bad about this take. And so, yeah, I am projected for 53 points, so I'm pretty much in line with you there. I think it feels similar to last year. I know a lot of people were talking about Tyler Bertuzzi coming to Toronto, and he's going to play with Matthews and Marner, and he was going to go off for 70 points, 80 points, whatever. And I was looking at the numbers. I was like, where do people think these points are coming from? He's not going to play top power play. He's going to skate 15 minutes a night. Yeah, those minutes are going to be nice at even strength, but that's it. That's all he gets. And it's just so hard to really like eclipse a certain level of production when you're only skating that number of minutes, even if you are playing it with some of the best players in the world. So yeah, I think this take is right on. I think Skinner will have some value in leagues this year. Definitely streamer value, probably standalone, like hold on your roster all season type of value in some deeper leagues at least. But yeah, I don't think Skinner is going to make you feel bad about this take, Blake. My bust number 4 is going to be Robert Thomas. Now, I have a pretty solid projection on Robert Thomas for this year. It's kind of to do with St. Louis in general and the fact that I don't think they have anybody else on the roster, but I have him for 25 goals, 64 assists, 89 points. The problem is that I really can't see any way that he does better than this. Like, it feels like the most likely scenario because I'm like looking at this lineup. I'm like, who's taking minutes away from Robert Thomas? I don't see it. I have him projected for 21 minutes. I don't think he goes higher than that. And he's been a pretty efficient player, and that's kind of how he gets here, right? 15.7% shooting percentage. I have him at 11.75% on ice shooting percentage, which is pretty high. Over 70% IPP at even strength. Over 70% IPP on the power play as well. Like I basically have him, it feels like maxed out on everything kind of across the board. And it gets him to this point where he gets a bunch of assists. He gets to 89 points, which is a nice point total. Don't get me wrong. But again, like 158 shots, 15 hits is what I have him projected for. He doesn't do any of the peripheral stuff. And I have this in the back of my mind. I have this major what if scenario with St. Louis this year where I'm just like, man, I don't know that Drew Bannister is that dude to like elevate a team without a ton of top end skill. And what if everything just kind of goes belly up this year and it's just a total tire fire? I think that Robert Thomas is the guy, because of the season he had last year, that you're actually going to have to pay for a little bit. And it's a scenario in which he could really, really hurt you, in my opinion, if things don't go the right way this year. Like, I could see him being below 70 points in a worst case scenario. Like, Bannister just gets totally fed up. He moves Buchnevich and Kyrou to the other line, and now all of a sudden you have Thomas playing with like Sod and I don't know, like
Yeah.
somebody from way further down the lineup. And yeah, there's just too many scenarios in which, like one injury to Buchnevich or Kyrou, there's so many scenarios that I'm looking at here with St. Louis where the coach can't get it done, a key player gets injured, a key line mate gets injured. There's just way, way, way more downside risk with Robert Thomas than there is upside, and it's just not a player that I'm going to be taking a big swing on this year.
Yeah. That's really well put. I mean, that's it exactly. The guy, there's so many things that have to happen for him to pop off the way he did last year. And like, in 2022-23, 65 points in 73 games. That's a 73-point pace. And then this last season, 86 points he got. So, his IPP went off the charts, like went all the way up at 5-on-5 up to 73%, right? Like, or 75%, damn, at 5-on-5, like where it was 60% the season before. So that's wildly, like, that's a big swing there, right? And a lot of the points are coming from that. Plus, he had the highest shots on goal per 60 of his career last year. Sorry, second highest. But I mean, he's not a big shooter, and then all of a sudden he starts taking more shots. It's just it's too many things to bank on, right? For us to treat this guy like an 89-point player, or I have him for 85, right? Which is, that's a great number. That is the type of player you want on your team. But yeah, he's not bringing anything else to the table. He's based off of massive efficiency. I did talk about Robert Thomas a little bit with Elon Dabrowski. I had him on ADP Battle recently, and Robert Thomas is amazing. He's a great facilitator. Like, there's no question about that. This guy is like, he's not just like some slug out there. Like, this guy's a great puck mover and facilitating offense and chances for his teammates. So he does that, right? And having a guy like Thomas on your line is great for Jordan Kyrou, right? If they do play with Pavel Buchnevich, it's great for him, right? But I just, again, like you said, there's too much there. There's too much there that has to go right, and I just don't see it happening. And if that doesn't go right, there's nothing else. There's no meat on the bone. So I'm with you there on Thomas. Is not a player I'm interested in at all.
For sure. Yeah, I mentioned in our last talk, the sleepers talk that we did, that, Martin Necas was a guy that I would draft ahead of my projection just because I believed in the upside scenarios and that he could actually, have kind of a pop-off season. Robert Thomas, a guy that I will definitely be drafting kind of behind my projection. I won't be taking him where, the spreadsheet says to take him based on the median projection. I'll be baking in a little more risk with Robert Thomas. All right, Blake. So for our fifth and final bust, we both took a player that's right up there in the top of the draft boards this year. We wanted to make a big statement with this one. And so, Blake, give us your top of the charts bust for this year.
This is hard. This is really hard because I don't want this to come across like I'm talking yang on these players. And I know you don't want to, like, we're not saying these guys are just going to be, don't draft them, and my bust is Artemi Panarin in the early rounds. Right. And he does have every chance to just smash or do something comparable to what he did last year. I mean, this guy had a 49 goal, 71 assist, 120 point season last year. He was elite. He had the highest shooting percentage of his career, the highest shots on goal per game, most power play points he's ever had, third best ice time he's ever had. Just everything went really well last year with Panarin, and I projected him similarly to last season. So I've got him for 41 goals, 72 assists, 113 points. So where's the bust, you say? Well, I mean, I'm kind of treating Panarin like the player he was last year, and I'll tell you why. Obviously, he found some real chemistry with his line mates, Alexis Lafreniere and Vinny Tro, friend of the show. These guys were a wagon. They were doing it all, and Panarin was the one leading the charge. This guy's incredible, right? At even strength. His IPP numbers are just ludicrous, like 83% last year, 77 the year before, 84 the year before, 93 the year before in just 42 games. But he's the guy making offense happen, and he had an elite season last year. But there's a couple weird things there. Like, how about his shot totals? That right off the bat, it's like, he's a guy that would kind of hover around 6 to 7, maybe 6 to 8 shots on goal per 60 at even strength. Well, last year, 9.67 shots on goal per 60. That's elite, right? Chuck and pucks, individual shot attempts per 60. He was up at 20. He's mostly around like the 11 to 13 range. He was up at 20 individual Corsi for per 60. Ridiculous. And his individual scoring chances were the very same. So that's we at the very least have to take pause there and be like, okay, that's different, right? And there are things we can point to, like I said, his line mates, also Peter Laviolette as the coach. I think obviously, he's asked Panarin to do something a little different, right? To be the sniper as opposed to the facilitator, and he absolutely did that. This guy almost got 50 goals. So it's not a pick I'm very comfortable with doing. Like, I've seen him going at 12, and we're trying not to talk about ADP here, but like I see him going at 12 and I'm just not comfortable there. Like, this is a guy we were drafting in the end of the second round, early third last year. And now we're talking first round for Panarin, and we're basing it off of what he did last year. And it's just that's really all it is. Like, it's so much change. And I don't think that he can't do it again, but I need to see a little bit, right? And it's not something I want to bank on in fantasy with my first pick.
Yeah, I think it's hard to argue with what you're saying there. The I I think this kind of falls into where we had guys like Tage Thompson, Jason Robertson last year. You look back at the season that they had, the pop-off season that they both had, and now you're wondering, was that actually who they are, or was that just one really good season where everything came together? The line mates were perfect all year long, just like created this perfect storm where they had, a career season. Those things happen. Like, every player is going to have their career season at some point in their career, and it's almost probable that we just witnessed that for Artemi Panarin. Obviously, we have him projected to take a little bit of a step back this year, both of us, but I think there's also the possibility that he steps back even a little bit more. The season before, he had 92 points in 82 games, and more of those were assists than they were goals. That ratio is a lot different as well, and so that matters in a lot of your leagues. So I think there's just, again, more scenarios here in which Panarin doesn't pay off that kind of early round, that early capital that you're going to have to put into him. And so for that reason, I think this is a pretty reasonable spot. And again, we're not talking like Artemi Panarin is going to like be the 70th ranked player in your scoring system at the end of the year. But there is like those early picks, if you miss on them and the other managers around you are grabbing these guys left, right, and center who are absolute studs for them all season long, like that can actually hurt you. And so that is kind of what we wanted to identify with our two picks at the end here. My pick for that is going to be JT Miller. My projection on him is 31 goals, 61 assists, 92 points. Now, obviously, JT Miller, you're in your Bangers Cats league, you're in your Faceoffs league. He's absolutely crushing all of that. So he has his own kind of standalone value with the hits and with the faceoffs and all of that he can bring to the table. But in, a bit more standard of a league, definitely in a points only league, that's where I think JT Miller's value really starts to come into question. We talked about Brock Boeser. Blake, you brought up Brock Boeser actually, unprompted. We didn't really talk about our picks beforehand. I think I put mine in the show sheet before you did, but it wasn't like we got together and said, let's talk about JT Miller and Brock Boeser together. We kind of came to that independently. And I think, we talked about how the PDO there in Vancouver, it's a little bit it was a little bit over the top last year. And so even if that just comes back down to roost a little bit, that means something for JT Miller this year. I think this is where I feel a lot more comfortable projecting him. This is where I kind of expected him to be last year, honestly, once all the dust settled. And he had a great season, probably a career season again for JT Miller there. Terrific player. Don't want to, talk yang on the player at all, but for sure, I think that should expect a pretty solid regression this upcoming season for JT Miller. And it's, again, much of the reasons that you talked about with Brock Boeser, that goes along with what JT Miller was able to do last year. I just think that you look at some of these percentages, 75% IPP, he's done stuff like that before, but it's always kind of come back down the following year a little bit. The shots per 60 was just in line. It wasn't an increase in what he's been able to do before. And so there's nothing like under the hood that's telling me, hey, this actually was a bit more of a step forward for him last year. And none of that is really showing up for me. The 19% shooting percentage, where he shot 14.3 and 15.5 the 2 seasons before, that's a bit of a red flag for me in terms of regression. And then that on ice shooting percentage up at 15.6.
Crazy.
Yeah, that one's coming back down for sure, in my opinion. And yeah, once you regress that all back down, and I think I mentioned this when we talked about Vancouver, but JT Miller skated 19:29 a night last year. The few seasons prior, he'd been up close to the 21-minute mark, actually got over the 21-minute mark in 2021-22. And so that's a significant number of minutes that you're chopping off of your opportunity to score more points, right? So he has to be more efficient to score those points. Obviously, it worked last year, but I don't think we can bank on that for every single year for the rest of the time for JT Miller. And so for those reasons, I think JT Miller might be a guy who disappoints at the top of draft boards this year.
Yeah, makes total sense. I mean, just last thing on the Canucks, I really do think after what happened in the playoffs last year, where they won a round, but it was like they had the least amount of shots that of any playoff team to win a round. That's not sustainable. You can't win that way. And I think that Rick Tocchet recognizes that, and we might see a little bit of a structural change with the Canucks systems here. And how is that going to affect JT Miller as well, right? Like I think they might open it up a little bit. And like the Canucks were a really good team in zone, not so much off the rush. So I'm wondering if they become more of a rush team, and does that change? Like it's just introducing variance as well as like all the things you mentioned. Plus, I really think that this 103 point season, that's ceiling. That's absolute ceiling for Miller. I don't see how he can get more. It's based off of so much efficiency, right? That some of it should tail off. I see him more like I've got him for 95 points, but I mean, 90 to 95 points to me is probably where JT Miller lives, with a really great fantasy floor because of everything else he brings, like periffs, faceoffs, power play points, crazy stuff. But yeah, I just can't see 100 points happening again.
All right, we've come to our, I guess, dishonorable mentions, if we could call them that. Blake, you got a couple guys here. I know you love to talk some Yang on this first guy.
I don't. I did last year, but I dug in on Duchesne. I'm like, oh, this guy's really good. I'm talking Matt Duchesne, everybody. Was that Duchesne in the bust list? No, he's in the dishonorable mentions. All right. He's still good to go. He's not in the bust list, but he's knocking on the door. Anyways, great season for Matt Duchesne last year. No question. Got to give the man his flowers. 65 points in 80 games, including 16 power play points too, which is quite a surprise in only 2 minutes of power play time on ice. So yeah, I mean, we've talked about the middle six in Dallas here. They were great. They were really, really good. Like, obviously, Duchesne found a lot of chemistry with Tyler Seguin and Mason Marchment. They had an amazing line, and they really elevated their team, right? Well, the top line in Dallas wasn't really cooking at full speed last year. So they had 3 solid lines in Dallas, and Duchesne was a big part of it. That said, I mean, he doesn't shoot. He doesn't get chances. Okay. Like it's a fact. And he's not getting the deployment that he needs for that to be sustainable. Like 16 minutes, 46 seconds average time on ice last year. I don't see that changing. I feel like that's kind of where it's going to be. I mean, in the playoffs too, the efficiency did fall off. Like he had 6 points in 19 games for Dallas, right? 7.4 shooting percentage, 2 power play points, right? With more time on ice. So I feel like, yeah, he came in, he was rejuvenated. And this is a very detail-oriented guy. He's really dialed in with what he's doing. He's a very cerebral player. I've read that in multiple, tweets and articles and stuff about Matt Duchesne. So I want to give the man his flowers. He's a great player, but I mean, this guy's going to be 34 next year. He's going to be in the middle six. We got guys on Dallas that are trending upwards, right? We got Wyatt Johnston. We got Logan Stankoven. Put some stank on it and do it now. All right. Plus Maverick Bourque. I mean, we got guys in the wings waiting to get some of this sweet deployment while Matt Duchesne just signed a 1-year deal. which is very strange just to see that 1-year deal after he popped off in the regular season and really made a difference for his team. So yeah, that all said, I feel like to expect 65 points from Matt Duchene, probably not realistic. I'm not drafting him anywhere, as you should not draft him either. All right, there you go. And then I'll give you my other one, Frank the Tank Vatrano. We're going streaking. Oh, yeah. You're my boy, Frank. And I love you. Anyways, this guy's in a contract year as well. 60 points in 82 games, 37 goals, 23 assists. How the hell? I mean, you and I have talked about Vatrano a bit over the years because he's a metrics guy. He really does show out. He's a per minute guy that we like to see. He's good shots, good chance generation. Well, Greg Cronin comes in here and he's like, buddy, get out on the ice. I mean, show me what you got, buddy. Show me your stuff. And he gave him a career high in ice time, 18 minutes, 21 seconds. That he did the 1A, 1B power play stuff. Thank you, Greg Cronin, for tooting in our faces. We don't like that. But, I mean, this guy really capitalized on his chances. 13 power play goals, 20 power play points on the season. I just don't see it happening again. Anaheim has got, again, same situation. They got guys in the wings that they want to prioritize. Leo Carlsson is done having his load managed. He busted, and he's ready to go. God, that's terrible. We'll definitely edit that. You got a healthy Alex Killorn in here. You got Troy Terry with Leo Carlsson, who he was looking to play with all year. I mean, Frank Vatrano in a contract year on the second line with Trevor Zegras most likely, and maybe Cutter Gauthier. A lot of variance on that. Where do we like Trevor Zegras this year? I like him, but I mean, yeah, he only signed a 2-year deal. He's coming off massive injuries. Cutter Gauthier, wild card, right? Obviously a great player, but first year in the league. And Mason McTavish is still there. Ryan Strome is still there. Does Vatrano even get second line? I don't know. So for those reasons, I'm definitely fading Vatrano. He's getting drafted much too high for me. But how about these periffs that Vatrano had last year too? 156 hits, 81 blocks, amazing stuff. 3 shorthanded points. I mean, this guy had a great year. This was one of those players. I don't know about you, Nate, but I didn't really notice him during the year. And then at the end of the year, I'm like, Vatrano was ranked 42nd overall in league scoring. Like, how the hell? What happened here? I mean, he was on the wire, for God's sake. I could have grabbed him at some point. So anyways, I don't know what you think about those two players.
Yeah, I think both of these guys not likely to repeat the seasons that they had last year. Duchene is a weird one. He's always been a weird one. He absolutely goes off for a season and then he fails to show up the following season. It seems to happen more often than not, and so it's just not a player that I'm interested in drafting and trying to attach myself to. He's more often than not in waivers in a fair number of leagues. Anything smaller than a 14-team league, he's probably going to be on waivers at some point throughout the season. And so, yeah, I might pick him up when he's hot at that point, but it's not a player I'm hitching my wagon to in terms of my fantasy season. Frank Vatrano, obviously career year last year. There's pretty much no way he hits 37 goals again, in my opinion. I have him projected for 29, which I still feel like is pretty generous. I do think he's going to get a decent amount of time. The peripherals are real. The shots are going to be there. The hits are going to be there. The blocks are going to be there. I do believe all of that. And so he will have value in that regard. But I don't think 30-plus goals is necessarily in the cards. And he could just, it could be a bit more of a youth movement in Anaheim this year. He could get a little bit deprioritized in that regard and just end up being more of a 17-minute player. And at the end of it, he could get moved to some other team at the trade deadline, and then he ends up like a third line left winger on a good team, and you're just left in your fantasy playoffs with absolutely nothing. So it's not a player that I'm excited about for next season by any stretch. All right, my two players here, my dishonorable mentions, are going to be Mika Zibanejad and Anze Kopitar. I think both of these players share some similarities in that we've seen some decline from them. Mika Zibanejad, I feel like we shouldn't be. It's kind of an odd spot for a player. He had that season where he popped off for what was it? It was 41 goals in 57 games. It was just an unreal shortened year that year for Mika Zibanejad. But since then, it's been a little bit more tough. And last year was very tough. And the underlying metrics were not good. It wasn't like it was just bad luck last year. He scored 26 goals, 72 points in 81 games. He didn't look like the same player under the hood. Didn't hear any injury reasoning as to why he was playing through something all year and he'll be better. The minutes didn't seem to get affected. That didn't seem to be a part of it. So it kind of feels like he just didn't get he didn't have a good season. He's 31 years old now. Typically you see players hang on to their prime just a little bit longer than that, but you have to bake in some possibility that Mika Zibanejad is just falling off a little bit at this point in his career. And that's a tough scenario to entertain, and especially for this player, he gets so much of his value from the power play, and that's a little bit more volatile than even strength year to year. And so there could be a scenario like if Artemi Panarin, God forbid, gets injured at some point throughout the season, that power play is going to be in tough straits, and the 32 points that I have projected for Mika Zibanejad on that power play are going to go away in a hurry, and that would be a really tough spot for him to be in my opinion. Overall, I just don't think this is a guy who has, that major 35 plus goal scoring upside anymore. And so for that reason, I think there's just always going to be somebody who's more interested in him than I am. And I think there's a downside risk here that we are just seeing some decline a little bit earlier than we might expect it, but we are just seeing some decline from this player. And he might have already played his best hockey, and that would be a pretty tough scenario. Last thing I'll say here, it's pretty obvious based on last year, that the Trocheck, Panarin, Lafreniere line is the top line now, and we could just see even more deprioritization of the Zibanejad line at even strength as Kreider and Zibanejad age. I think that's well within the possibilities here. Kopitar is a little bit more straightforward for me. Just, I mean, he's really getting up there now in age. They're switching Quentin Byfield to center. They want him to be the franchise 1C. I don't know that he really overtakes Kopitar this year, but I think it's well within the realm of possibility that Kopitar's minutes get slashed a little bit this year as they work in both Byfield and Philip Deneau as the 3C, who's still a terrific player in his own right, terrific two-way player, and Selke candidate in a lot of years. So I think that we've seen it under the hood with Kopitar. It's been coming the last 2-3 years, where his underlying metrics have declined. His efficiency has kind of gone up, and so it's been masked a little bit, in my opinion. But I don't think that Kopitar is the same player anymore, and I think this could be the season where all of that kind of comes home to roost a little bit, and we finally have that fall off season where the floor just falls out a little bit, and he's like under 60 points, and he's just not a player that you're looking at as anything more than a streamer.
Yep. I'm I'm into your takes on both those players, and it sucks, especially for Zibanejad, because this is a guy that I've won with before. And he's like, I had him in that season where he popped the hell off in that shortened season. I love the player. I love what he brings to the table, but again, same thing with Panarin. Well, Panarin's flourishing and going off. This guy is under Peter Laviolette. It's not really working out in the same way, right? So
Yeah.
obviously they're prioritizing things a little bit differently. Like they're going to that, Panarin line now as their number one, and Zibanejad is more of a secondary piece. Yeah, and he's a streaky player at that. So, I mean, yeah, he's a center only. That's kind of a tough spot in that mushy middle of your draft there, where you're looking to get Zibanejad. And I just think there are other players that are more exciting in and around that spot that don't have the same kind of variance, you know what I mean, or concerns.
Yeah.
Just like 72-point season when New York was a wagon all year. It's like, oh, what happened, buddy? That kind of stinks, right? His floor is going to be no problem. Like he's gonna have a great floor because of the power play. That's not going to change, but he might just be a 70 to 80-point player moving forward. And that's what we got from Zibanejad. Whereas I think we saw him last year as like a 90-point player, right? Which like he was trending that way. So yeah, too bad about Zibanejad. That's fine. And Anze Kopitar, yeah. How durable is this freaking guy? This is crazy. I'm just looking at his games played numbers. Like this guy's a machine. I love Anze Kopitar. And I think this is a player that has adapted really well in his older age, right? Like, yeah, you said the efficiency went up. Obviously, like he's still playing, 81 games, 82 games every season. Like he's good to go, and he's a great power play performer as well, or at least an better than average one, right? And he's done well there with the LA power play. I'm interested to see what they do. Like, I'm not sure who's going to be on the left wing there. I think you had Trevor Moore doing that. I have Alex Laferriere on there, but I mean, it's going to be a revolving door, in my opinion. I don't think either one of those guys is going to lock down that spot. And I do think Byfield he's going to be that 2C. So we'll see what happens. I don't know what they're doing in LA, but yeah, I'm not touching Anze Kopitar anywhere here. He's going to be a great streamer though. If he's not drafted, like this is your premium streamer for LA.
All right, we've made it to the end of this one. While you're here, like, rate, review, subscribe, comment, all that stuff really does help us out. It's the best way that you can show some sort of appreciation if you're getting any value of what we're bringing to the table here. You can also click the link below in the description, join the Discord community. Tons of fantasy managers in there talking about fantasy all day, every day. And you should also head over to the Apples and Ginos Patreon, go to the shop, check out the Apples and Ginos Fantasy Guide. It is $7.99 Canadian, and it will absolutely set you up for the fantasy season this year. 32 NHL team previews in there, plus a bunch of standalone articles. We've been getting really good reviews from everybody who's bought it. They've all said it's been a huge help to their fantasy preparation this year, so definitely check that out as well. Well, Blake, I think that's all we've got for this episode. Hopefully, it brought you some value, helped you get a little bit better at fantasy hockey today. All the advanced stats you heard today came from Natural Stat Trick, which is a terrific free resource. Many thanks to the band there for supplying the music for the podcast. Be sure to check out their Spotify as well. That's it, folks. Much love.